Hello again, everyone. Welcome to the latest edition of The Opening Bell with me, Alex Steedman, and Matt Christie. A packed show, lots to get through, loads of news lines, lots of fights from the weekend, and plenty coming up as well. Reflecting on Cacace Jazza, Pierce O'Leary with a performance of his life, Barbosa getting the job done at the weekend and putting his name back in the mix for the big fights, whether it's back down to 140 or remaining up at 147. The mighty Collazo as well, the power punching, swashbuckling minimum weight Puerto Rican. We'll talk about him as well. There's action in Belfast this weekend, plus at the Copper Box, plus out in Florida. It is a packed weekend. And we delve back into the history books from 95 when the then unbeaten Herbie Hyde stepped up in class to meet Big Daddy Riddick Bowe. All of that coming up this week in history. A little touch of the heavyweights, which will please Matt Christie, no doubt.
It's a cracking little fight, that is, isn't it? It's like
a bit mad.
It's like a slapstick. It's like a slapstick fight.
It's mad. It's mad. It looks like, it's cartoon-esque. Almost a fight between two guys who appear like they should be in different weight divisions.
Yeah, it's bizarre. It's really bizarre. It took me right back to that brief little period where I was convinced Herbie Hyde was gonna cement his name in heavyweight history as one of the greatest that ever lived.
Indeed. Didn't quite work out. But anyway, lots to talk about from that this week in history from 1995 as we try and paint a picture of a fight from yesteryear, try and encourage you to delve back into the archives to perhaps extend your boxing reading as well as your boxing knowledge, and lots of related subjects around that. So that's the point of this week in history. The news lines this week, Matt, quite a few of them tie together, and they are Top Rank aligning with DAZN. That's going to be announced probably by the time you listen to the pod. Top Rank now getting a broadcasting deal, and many boxing fans will feel that is about time. It's what that organisation and maybe the sport needs. We've also heard news in the last couple of weeks about AJ being teased by Zuffa. We'll talk to Matt about that. We also have heard about background legals between Joy Opataya, his team, and the IBF after that wouldn't it title be on the line against Brandon Glanton. Also, Michaela Mayer moving to MVP. I want to tie that in. And also the news in the last week that Spencer Brown, fairly long time mentor manager of Tyson Fury, is going to be the lead promoter for Fury Makhmudov coming up in early April. So all of those, one way or another, tie together quite a few of the strands we've been talking about with regard to the changing landscape of this great sport. So a lot to get into. Top Rank, big news, Matt, for them and for the sport.
There was some whispers that they were going to be back with ESPN, and then it was confirmed to us yesterday, which was Monday, that they have got the broadcast deal with DAZN. I think Top Rank, in fairness, although they haven't been the Top Rank that we have long been familiar with over the last year or so, they've done remarkably well to kind of just stay relevant and just keep the engine going. Just about. I mean, it was spluttering for a while, but they did stay relevant. And now they've gone over to DAZN. Not a big surprise at all. They've still got some really good fighters on their roster. I think they're going to do 10 to 12 shows a year. It's not huge money that's been reported. They don't want to do any kind of pay-per-views. So I think that's welcome. But ultimately, it's kind of what we said, isn't it? In that we are starting to see everybody kind of filter. The old guard is on one side, which is on the DAZN side. And then you've got Zuffa kind of doing their own thing. And I think that is the way that we're going to see it. Will it encourage all of the promoters to kind of join forces? I think we might see some more cross promotions than we're used to seeing, to be honest with you. It would make sense as well. And I think the advantage for Top Rank from a US perspective is that they are operating on US soil. Therefore, there isn't going to be the potential clashes that there might be between Frank Warren and Eddie Hearn, for example, if they're looking at scheduling difficulties. Top Rank at the moment are the lone American promoter with a contract. Golden Boy, it's my understanding that they're kind of doing it fight by fight with DAZN. They haven't got an existing contract in place with them, but Top Rank have, and I think they've got the stable to make it work. I think it's good news.
The money that is being reported per show, Matt, does that suggest to you that this is more a vehicle for Top Rank's sort of would-be stars of tomorrow and the fighters coming through, rather than necessarily any of the recognised names?
I think that's exactly why they made a point, or they've made a point of saying they're not going to be looking at pay-per-view, is that they probably would struggle to generate one that would be deemed worthwhile. But yes, and I think a lot of, I mean, there's certain TV deals that will appear superb from a financial point of view. There's others that, and I think this might be one of them, where the promoters kind of feel that they have to accept it just to show that they're still in the game. I know certain promoters that were in discussions with ESPN, and the money that's being offered, really, they're going to have to find a lot out of their own pockets to make certain shows occur. But ultimately, they would consider a deal with someone like ESPN because it looks fantastic on the CV. We're on ESPN. We mean business. We're on DAZN. We mean business. So yeah, the money that is being discussed, I think it's not quite what they were getting for when they're on the ESPN platform. So we'll have to see. I don't think there's any harm if they are looking at, because they signed I forget the name, but Top Rank recently announced that they signed a 5-0 prospect, a really highly regarded one. And if that's what they're doing, then that's fine. Ultimately, though, I think, isn't that what Zuffa said they were going to be doing? And I think we're still waiting to see what's going on with Zuffa. Are they going to do this league? Because if they are, how does that work? Because we've seen no evidence as yet. To me, Zuffa is doing what ProBox are doing, but they're doing it with a bigger budget. And that is making well-matched fights at a certain level. And then they've obviously got their headline names that they're bringing in. But as for Top Rank, you know, Bob Arum can only be around for another few years, surely, at most. So I do think that we are seeing an evolution in that company.
It's come a little too late for Michaela Mayer, the Top Rank news, although given her status in the sport and where she's at in her career, it probably wouldn't have impacted on her anyway. And in truth, the dangling carrot of joining Jake Paul and Most Valuable Promotions would have been enormous anyway, given the moves that they're making in the game. So Mayer to MVP, it's a good move for her, given the kind of fighters that are already there. It's a good move for Jake Paul and MVP, obviously. The question I want to ask you, Matt, is do you think at some stage we might see MVP properly link up with Zuffa Boxing in a notable way? Because obviously Dana White and Jake Paul share similar political stances. They share a similar political stroke friendly relationship with the current president of the United States. We've talked also already about the kind of background politics that are ongoing that have an impact upon, or might and will have an impact upon the sport. And certainly in the background, the noise is trying to have an impact on the sport and what it is that Zuffa want to do. So the first question is, do you think Jake Paul will end up steering towards Zuffa in a quite significant way?
No, I don't. I'd be surprised. I think it might just be as simple a reason as egos. I think there's already a lot of egos kind of jostling for position behind the scenes at Zuffa. I include Dana White in that. Obviously, Turki Al Sheikh is involved there as well. You throw Jake Paul and his partner into the mix, and I think everybody will really struggle to have their voice heard. I also think that MVP are making a very clear play to dominate female boxing, and they have said that their focus at the moment is not necessarily the male code. And how interested are Zuffa in female boxing, for example? There seems to be a very kind of highly charged, testosterone full environment over at Zuffa at the moment, and I'm not quite sure that the female boxing is what they'll be looking at, what they'll be looking at pushing. Whereas MVP, essentially, they are not far off from almost owning that market. And I think any female fighter, whoever they're with at the moment, will be looking to get a contract with Jake Paul and MVP.
Okay, second part of that question relates to what extent do you I'm going to come back to that because I'm going to link it out to other news lines, but I'm just going to tease the idea, and that is, to what extent do you think that Zuffa are, with a lot of the sort of teases, the offers, how much of that is just as a kind of disrupting influence, a disrupting effect on the rest of the sport that might have a knock-on positive effect for them? So how much of that is about intent? We want this fighter, we want that fighter. Or how much of it is just about prodding the bears and poking the ribs and disrupting the status quo? And with that in mind, of course, we were hearing in the last few weeks about Anthony Joshua being teased by Zuffa. How much of that was just an approach? How much of that was actually offers on the table?
Well, I said it before, that there's 5 or 6 superstars in boxing at the moment that are capable of moving the dial. Anthony Joshua is one of them. And I think that they will say that they want to conquer the world. I still believe that the money that was paid to get Conor Benn on side was a massive middle finger up to Matchroom. It was a massive look at what we can do. You think that's your prized possession? Well, he's over here now. And Conor Benn has got a longer future in the sport, one would think, than Anthony Joshua. Joshua may only have one more fight left. Who knows what's left of Anthony Joshua after the horrendous things that he's been through? But it doesn't surprise me in the slightest that an approach was made. We also saw Anthony Joshua's reaction to it, didn't we? We heard about his reaction to it, and he told Eddie Hearn straight away. Well, we're led to believe that's what happened. We're led to believe an awful lot of things at the moment. There are rumours flying around left, right and centre. Some of them seem ridiculous, and then some of them will be confirmed the next day as fact. So even though I said no to MVP and Zuffa Boxing joining forces, it wouldn't be the biggest surprise ever. MVP, I think, have got an announcement today. Where are we at? Oh, no, tomorrow, March the 18th, is an announcement. But I think that's to do with Jake Paul. I think that's to do with Jake Paul getting back in the ring. But there's an awful lot of power plays going on. And ultimately, it just shows us what I've already kind of explained a little bit. The amount of egos in the sport that need feeding and need reinforcing, and at the same time are oh so delicate. I personally don't think there's any... I think it's an impossibility for someone to come in and take over the sport. I've said that before. And I think the fact that someone like Top Rank has just signed this deal with DAZN suggests that they're not going anywhere. Whereas 6 weeks ago, we were thinking, has that organisation got any future in the sport? All of these people, like your Eddie Hearns, your Bob Arums, your Frank Warrens, and your Oscar De La Hoyas, they're not going to go anywhere. They're going to fight their corner for as long as they possibly can. And I think we will see a renewed determination from the majority of them to prove that they belong, that they still belong.
So what do we make, given the politicking and the moves, what do we make of Spencer Brown being lead promoter for Fury Makhmudov? There's obviously the relationship, the business working and personal relationship with Fury anyway. But what does this tell us maybe about the politics of the sport, what it is Zuffa are trying to do, and whether they can do it over here in the UK? Because obviously it's a Netflix experience. Just give us your feeling about what this tells us.
I mean, this was a fairly kind of, in terms of kind of Zuffa's grand plan, we know that they have been talking to the British Boxing Board of Control about potentially getting Zuffa titles associated with the British Boxing Board of Control. But that was just a conversation. If they want to exclusively stage their own shows in the UK, they will need a British license holder to do that. So they'll need to work alongside a promoter. Spencer Brown has his own promotional outfit, Gold Star, which actually started out as kind of a after dinner speech kind of ticketing event, where he would get famous people, largely boxers or ex-boxers, and people would pay on the door to see them, and they'd talk about their careers. That's how he started, and that's how he got to meet some influential people. And his standing has skyrocketed in the last 5 or 6 years. He's a close ally of Turki Al-Sheikh. Therefore, you would think he'd have some kind of relationship with the guys at TKO. But he is the one who will be the official lead promoter. So it can't be a Zuffa show. That doesn't mean that someone like a Dana White, for example, who will probably want his fingerprints on a card that involves Conor Benn, that doesn't mean that Dana White can't come and be involved with it. But it would be in association with Zuffa. It would not be a Zuffa show. And this is something that has greatly interested Eddie Hearn in the last week or so, because he's keeping an eye on that situation, because I think it was Mark Shapiro at TKO/Zuffa went on record as saying the show at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium in April will be a Zuffa show. And one can kind of presume that there might be some kind of legal wranglings in regard to Conor Benn signing with Zuffa, but then not fighting on a Zuffa show. Whether they'll be able to get around that by saying it was in association with Dana White or in association with Zuffa Boxing, I really don't know. But again, it's all power plays, isn't it? But in regard to Spencer Brown and the situation with Tyson Fury, it is my understanding that there is no hard feeling whatsoever between Spencer Brown and between Spencer Brown and Queensberry, or between Spencer Brown and Frank Warren. It's also my understanding that Tyson Fury remains promoted in the UK by Queensberry, and he still deals with Top Rank as well as his kind of worldwide promoter, or whatever the deal was there. It is also my understanding that this contest is it's not part of a big multi-fight deal. And it's very similar, in fact, to, say, Anthony Joshua when he fought Jake Paul, when he fought on an MVP event. But he wasn't turning around and saying goodbye to Matchroom at any point. He was just fighting on a different platform. You could even say the same, and this is a similar situation in regard to when he fought Daniel Dubois. That was a Queensberry promoted event. Anthony Joshua was the fighter on there, but he was still with Matchroom. You can read an awful lot into all of these things that are happening at the moment. And I still think that we will see further changes in that. But as I say, that's my understanding of that whole situation at the moment.
Does that mean for Fury Makhmudov that Queensberry and Top Rank will get paid?
Not necessarily, no. I mean, Queensberry will not be doing any kind of on the ground organisation or anything at all for this. As for Top Rank, I'm not sure. I'm not sure on Top Rank, but Queensberry will not be involved in this show.
What does it mean going forward?
Not in an official capacity. And I think there is some thought being given as to whether there's a representative of Queensberry there on the night, watching at ringside, because ordinarily in these sort of situations they would be. But of course we know that Queensberry, Turki Al-Sheikh, TKO, so by association Zuffa, are involved in a pretty hefty legal scrap at the moment. So whether Frank Warren will sit there with a smile on his face while all that is going on, I don't know.
So is it therefore, final word on this, is it a bit like I was saying last week about, fighter A leaves trainer A, joins trainer B, doesn't like it at trainer B, asks to go back to trainer A, and because trainer A is good, they have a good relationship, but more importantly, didn't say anything that perhaps they wanted to say at the time, no damage was done, and therefore they were able to go back together. Is there an element of that here with Queensberry, do you think? Don't rock the boat, because even though we're not getting paid this time, we might get a slice of the action next time.
Very possibly. I think that every promoter at the moment is very careful with which battles they choose to fight, which contacts they choose to keep on side. And Spencer Brown, at the moment, is, believe it or not, you could argue he's one of the most influential people in the sport, purely because of the relationships that he has worked hard to maintain.
Boxing, man.
I know.
Boxing. It's amazing, isn't it? What a game. What a game that you can rock up. Listen, I'm sure he's worked hard. Maybe he's a great guy. Maybe he's a brilliant businessman. Maybe he's one of the best around. But boxing, what a sport that you can rock up, grease a few pants, or shake a few hands, smile, and then suddenly, there you go. I mean, what a game. What a game. Final question on that, Matt. What is all of that, the way it's played out this time, what does it mean for Zuffa going forward with regard to working in the UK, or their desires perhaps to promote fights over here, work with fighters over here?
Well, if they, as I say, they will need, if they want to do it all on their own, they're going to need someone within that organisation with a British licence. If they want to do it all on their own and they want to work under the auspices of the British Boxing Board of Control, then they will need someone with a British licence there. So whether they will employ someone to do that, or whether they will just kind of have this relationship with Spencer Brown and Gold Star, so that Spencer Brown is the one that's answering to the British Boxing Board of Control. He's the one essentially handing in the paperwork, but all the work is being done behind the scenes by Zuffa. I'm not sure. I suspect when you look at how Zuffa have positioned themselves in the last few months, and this is kind of, we are coming to dominate, we are coming to conquer, one would think that they would want someone from their own organisation being that representative. But if you go back and you look, if you look at, we've had fights, that we've had events in this country, even just talking in recent years, that the A side of the main event was a top ranked fighter, or it was a golden boy fighter. They were not the promoter on that event. They had to work alongside someone, whether that was Eddie Hearn, Frank Warren, Ben Shalom. So yeah, it would be quite unusual if they did that. But I think if they are coming to conquer and they want world domination, then they probably want a British promoter involved.
Yeah, that's only a matter of time. That's literally dotting the I's, crossing the T's. That is something they'll be able to do very straightforwardly and double quick, I'd imagine. One name that won't be on that list of options is Steve Goodwin, actually. Steve Goodwin and family are pulling out of boxing, and the work that they've done, Matt, over the years on the kind of small hole show, the grassroots of the sport, helping careers in their infancy. It's impossible to put that into some sort of worth and value.
Just one of the best promoters in this country that probably an awful lot of people haven't heard of. This shows that he would be putting on. Sometimes he was doing them weekly. I know when I was at Boxing News, I mean, I used to speak to him a lot. How do you keep doing this? Because he wasn't making any money. I mean, he had money coming in thankfully, from elsewhere. But the headache of putting those shows on, where sometimes there'd be 12, 13 fights on there, often a vehicle for prospects and up-and-comers. He would offer contracts to fighters that couldn't get them with the big promoters. Helped an awful lot of careers, helped an awful lot of people, and was a real asset to the sport. But I must say, when I saw that news on Sunday, that he decided that kind of enough is enough, I wasn't remotely surprised. I don't know how half of them do it. These promoters that will put on a show in a leisure centre or the equivalent of a York Hall, week in, week out, barely come out of it with any money at all. Hardly any of them do. They're not doing it for the money. They're doing it for the love of it. I don't know how they do it. So it wasn't a surprise when Steve Goodwin walked away. But he can turn around now and he can take a bow. He was a fantastic servant for British boxing.
Amen to that. Amen to that. We want to get on with the fight. So I'll touch on some of the other news lines again next week. They are the Opataya legals with the IBF. Tommy Hearn's ongoing sort of guardianship. Strange story, this, but there's a kind of family conflict, guardianship battle going on for Tommy Hearns, and probably his sort of health and wealth, really. So we'll report on that again. We've touched on it a couple of times on the pod over the last 6 months. We'll come back to that next week. Pay tribute to Jordan Granham, who had his 200th fight last weekend. Unbelievable. So we'll come back to that. Amazing. 200. He got a win as well. Well done to Jordan. And Galal Yafai's coming back in action. He's got Richie Sandoval in a world title fight. TBC in terms of venue, date, etc. But Galal getting right back in, and he deserves it after what happened to him against that drugs cheat previously. We'll come back to that in due course. But let's talk about the fights, shall we? In Dublin at the weekend, what an atmosphere. What an atmosphere that was. You could see how the broadcasters were stirred by it in the same way that sort of me and my Boxing Nation colleagues were the first time we went to Belfast back in sort of 2012, 13, 14 for those Frampton nights. It was almost shocking how amazing it was. And you got a sense of that at the weekend, both for the DAZN crew, but also for Frank Warren as well. You could see the euros jangling around in Frank's eyes, couldn't you? And no surprise, and rightly so. Fantastic atmosphere for Cacace, Jazza, and also for O'Leary against Maxie Hughes, Matt.
Yeah, it did. It looked fantastic. It's one of those atmospheres that the people there will say it was one of the best they've ever experienced. And those of us watching on the telly won't quite get our head around that. I think when you have experienced those kind of hothouse atmospheres, there's something else. And you're right to kind of reference Belfast. Belfast was the first thing that came to my mind. I've never been to a fight in Dublin, actually. But when you see the kind of joy that was there on the night, it makes you want to go. I was looking at sending someone actually for Boxing Scene, but Dublin, for about 4 days in Dublin was a similar cost to what it would have been to send someone over to New York, to be honest with you. It was incredible. So I couldn't justify it.
Dublin's mad. By the way, it's been like that since when I was at uni in the 90s. I used to go over there for weekends. It's been like that since the 90s. And then the road of the Celtic Tiger. I mean, back then it was London house prices, London car prices. So I don't know how anyone affords to live over there. It's absolutely mad. I hope they're getting well paid. But Katie was ringside, wasn't she? Katie was ringside. Of course, she's tasted that atmosphere, so she knows what it's all about. And I do believe it was probably aided and abetted by a good chunk of Belfast fans. I do believe they played their part in why that was such a good atmosphere and such a good crowd. It was there was a Cacace there on the bill. There was a Belfast influence. But Cacace, Jazza, were you bothered by the scorelines in any way? I mean, it was a hard to score fight and not much meaningful action or exchanges. In truth, they were limited, weren't they? But we got two squeaky cards, 115, 113, a couple of times.
Yeah, I wasn't bothered. I thought Jazza was in control earlier. I thought Jazza, say if you'd have asked me after 5-6 rounds who's going to win this, I'd have said Jazza Dickens is going to win this. Then I thought Cacace came on, and I thought his moments were more memorable. I'm largely I could say that I can't really think of one, but it just felt like he was more in control during the second half than Jazza was in the first, if you see what I'm saying. So I thought it was fine. I thought it was going to be close. I thought it would upset some people, and it did. But I thought Cacace nicked it with his industry in the second half.
I did as well. There was a few dissenting voices on Twitter, almost exclusively Liverpool-based noise. So I think we need context with that. But listen, when you've got little action and you've got tight rounds and you've not got many punches landed, you can always have a debate and have an argument. I thought Jazza was good at what he was doing. I just didn't think, the twitches, the feints, really clever boxing thought. But I just never thought there was anything at the end of it. And there was never really any punches at the end of it. And you look at his face in the second half of the fight. You look at Jazza's eyes. Yeah. Second half of the fight, I thought it did tell its own story about where the meaningful damage or punches were landed. Either way, Cacace got the nod. As he said afterwards, he said he had a bad night and still managed to win. Unification fight. he wants. Frank said, it'll be here, I'll make it happen. So you've got the likes of Navarrete, Foster, Shaki Foster, Ray Ford. I wonder if it's more likely to be a home name like a Ryan Garner, who's supposed to be on the cusp, or Lee Wood, who of course bounced back just the other week.
I mean, yeah, the first three names you mentioned would probably be more appealing to us as hardcore fans. But I think if you're on the gate and you're counting exactly how many people are coming through and paying for tickets, then the last two names you mentioned might make more sense for Cacace. And he's at that point of his career now, isn't he, where he spent an awful long time kind of trying to get to this level. And how much longer has he got left at this level, do you think? 2 fights, maybe? Depends who the opponent is. So I think he'll be very, very wise to, rather than looking at getting another belt, he'll be very wise to add a few extra zeros to his bank account, to be honest with you.
He's defying logic, isn't he? In those weight divisions, 37 he is, Cacace. He is defying logic. But he got the nod in the end. And Pierce O'Leary produced the performance of his life, didn't he? Good atmosphere. Sold a ton of tickets as well. A couple of thousand tickets on his own just in a couple of weeks. So that speaks volumes about him, doesn't it? A fighter at his stage of his career, that already he can command that kind of presence on a night like that. That's quite impressive, Matt.
It is. When he can, I mean, fighters like that are gold dust. They've got the ability, they've got the personality, and they sell tickets. Often you will get a ticket seller that's super, super popular. Promoters will keep them very, very close by, but they'll also be aware of the limitations, and you can have a bit of a matchmaking headache. With Pierce O'Leary, don't get me wrong, I'm not going to say he's ready for the best in the world, but I think with that bustling Queensbury stable, he is the one that George and Frank Warren, I think, will be extra determined to make sure that they keep him part of their roster, because he could be big business in the future. He's terrific to watch as well. I mean, Maxie Hughes, you could argue, coming towards the end of his career, kind of he had that period over lockdown, didn't he, where lots of people saying, well, he should be British Fighter of the Year. He's really turned his career around, but I think that he kind of reached as far as he was going to go, and he's on the way back down again. He also what did he have, 5 weeks notice as opposed to kind of a full camp? So it was predictable, but that shouldn't take anything. You shouldn't take any of the achievement away from Pierce O'Leary if we get it done so professionally and emphatically.
Yeah, it's sort of style over substance, isn't it, really? Because everything was in Pierce O'Leary's favour. Everything. I mean, the dice and the bases couldn't have been any more loaded than they were. Youth, stage of their careers. Maxie Hughes gets 4 weeks' notice. He's moving up in weight. He's 36. I mean, pile it up bit by bit. I mean, it couldn't have been set up. It's one of the saddest things is, seeing a fighter who can't do it anymore. That's not Maxie necessarily, but seeing the old pro dished up to the young prospect, it's hard to watch sometimes, isn't it? And Maxie just couldn't do anything about it. So you have to have that context. You have to have it. But, and it's a big but, O'Leary was the best that we've seen him. The intensity and that sort of high intense press, his feet were good. There was no escape from Maxie Hughes. He was under it right from the very start, all the way throughout that. And that was because O'Leary was at the best we've seen him. And suddenly we got a glimpse, Matt, of what some of the chat and the chuntering and the hype, the slight hype, we suddenly got a little glimpse of it. Even although he had everything in his favour, we got a glimpse of maybe what some of these people have been seeing and saying.
Oh, absolutely. I'm just looking at some of the sanctioning body rankings to see where he was placed. I mean, this will be before the fight, but the one name that I was looking at there is obviously Dalton Smith. Mm-hmm. And he was number 6 with the WBC prior to Saturday night's victory. Now, a win over someone like Maxie Hughes, who isn't ranked in the top 15, won't necessarily see him skyrocket to number 1, but Maxie Hughes might have been in the top he might have been in the top 40 of the WBC rankings in the division below. And that, believe it or not, will carry some weight when the WBC are considering or being persuaded about what to do with Pierce O'Leary in the next set of rankings. He's also in the 15th with the IBF. So I think you'll start to see him moved quite aggressively towards a world title shot. And Frank Warren and Queensberry are probably the best in the business at engineering title shots for their fighters.
There was a comment with that regard from one of the broadcasters on the night. I'm not digging out DAZN and I'm not digging out individual broadcasters, but here's the quote after Pierce O'Leary won so emphatically. "You're a world champion now. All the names are going to come calling." I mean, please, there's no need for that. What we need is context and honesty. Come on. Honestly, you think after that, Shakur, Keyshawn, Teal, or even Dalton Smith or Adam Azim are going to come calling, knocking on the door of Pierce O'Leary? As good as he looked, and as much as we like him, and as much as we want to see him again, really? Honestly? Come on. Don't be ridiculous. More likely, it's a Sean McComb, isn't it? That's a good fit. That's a good fight. That's a good name. He's not even going to get Dalton or Adam Azim anytime soon. So just context and a bit of truth, I think. But O'Leary looked terrific. He looked terrific, and I'm excited about where the journey goes now with him, because we got a little glimpse into the future, didn't we?
We did, and I think kind of further context into your comment there, and the reason why they said you're a world champion now is because there was an IBO belt on the line, and I think for a certain level of fighter, the IBO belt can serve a purpose. Frank Warren did it with Ricky Hatton, where the WBU title served a purpose for Ricky Hatton for a while. So whether this IBO title will serve its purpose for Pierce O'Leary in the short term, or if it will be relinquished and they'll look at the more established sanctioning bodies, we wait and see.
Yeah, Hatton was the name that I was absolutely thinking of, Matt. But you've also got to have kind of context when Hatton was sort of winning those kind of WBUs. I mean, how many years further down the line was he to O'Leary? I mean, and how many years was he away from actually getting that shot against Costa Zhu? 5? Something like that?
Yeah.
So, yeah, the context again, but it's a fair comment to make. Just O'Leary's a little behind in terms of that progress at the moment, but it's a good chance he'll get there. Maybe he'll get there, and plenty of people are going to pay to find out, and plenty of us are going to want to watch as well. Over in the States, I tell you what, good weekend for the selections, wasn't it? Or at least for mine. How good was Barbosa? Bet of the weekend. Cha-ching. How good was Barbosa against Kenny Sims?
Really good. Yeah, it's exceptional. Probably Jack Catterall watched that. Felt a little bit better about himself. Because Barbosa looked probably better than I've seen him at any point. Sims, I thought that was a bit disappointing, but Barbosa was, he did everything that he said he was going to do. I know, I think it was Barbosa, wasn't it? Last week I was saying, he said he's in good shape and everything. Well, he turned out to be. He was, talk about a kick up the backside for his career prospects.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder if maybe Sims left some of himself, some of his career behind in that Duarte fight. It could have been. Maybe he had an off night. But I just think Barbosa, it wasn't quite the way I thought, because Barbosa's normally front foot, isn't he? And he feints and makes you punch first, and then he's really fast with the counters. In the end, he did it all off the back foot. And even although Sims tried to change the play midway through it and get Barbosa to come forward, it didn't work. He just beat him in every single way. I thought he was terrific. I suppose the question now is, does he stay at 147 or is he coming back down to 140? Given how good he looked, You might think the latter, or he didn't look a massive 147 fighter, did he?
No, and I think if he can kind of go between the two, if it's not too difficult for him to get to 140, there might be more kind of winnable opportunities for him there. But I think he's at this stage, isn't he? He'll go wherever the opportunities are. Did you see the Pro Box main event last week?
No, not
Nahi
yet.
Lopez. Oh, yeah, absolutely. I'm sure plenty of our listeners did, but yeah, right up there with fights of the year so far. Terrific. And do you know what I didn't see? I didn't see Collazo, whatever we say. I mean, I haven't seen that yet.
Yeah, he was good. He just he did what he does. He's massive. He looks like a featherweight or super featherweight down at minimum weight. He just looks so broad. And yeah, Jesus Haro was just he was too small. He boxed quite nicely through the first couple of rounds, but in the end he was just on the back foot, didn't have enough power, couldn't keep Collazo off him. And in the end, I tell you what Collazo does really well is he punches up and down. He's really heavy to the body, but he's always changing the attack from head to body. So you never quite know where the next hurtful shot's coming from. It's really clever. He's co-promoted by Miguel Cotto as well as Oscar De La Hoya. So he's got that kind of, Puerto Rican legend backing as well. Where he goes remains to be seen. He's becoming one of my favorite fighters. There's a Chinese fighter called Dian Xingzhu who's 16-1. He's probably in the mix. There's a couple of Japanese fighters called Ishii and Matsumoto who are probably not far off being in the mix. And he's already beaten the WBC champion Melvin Jerusalem, a Filipino fighter. He beat him a couple of years ago. I suppose that they're probably on the cusp to do a unification rematch with him as well. So there are loads of options. Suspect he might, as is often the case for those lighter weight fighters, he might end up having to go out to China or to Japan in particular to make his money and get those fights. But he is box office, that little guy. And given he's got Cotto in his corner, he's going to get moved in the right way and he's going to make a few quid as well. So put him on your list and I'll be watching that Nahi Lopez fight as well. We're back to Ireland again this weekend. DAZN are in Belfast on Friday. Conlon against Walsh. Walsh has got one of those records that looks good and then you scratch the surface and you don't have to scratch the surface very much. Although he did narrowly beat a fighter who'd gone the distance with Angelo Leo. So there is some form there. At the Copper Box, also on DAZN on Saturday, one of those sort of prospects bills, although you've got a British and Commonwealth champion in George Liddard who looked really good, up against a guy who didn't live above the butchers in Rowley Regis, but does hail from Rowley Regis in Tyler Denny, and stateside in Florida, also on DAZN. Finally, they're getting Adamez against Amo Williams on. Adamez probably favourite to win that one. So there's plenty to get our teeth into, Matt.
There is. I like a lot of those matchups. I think for Michael Conlon at this stage of his career, I think he's looking to get a victory here, and then hopefully his promoters can get him a title shot. You would think that Conlon will be far too classy for him, but Conlon is at that stage of his career where all of a sudden it could all go wrong for him. But I'm not going to pick the upset there. Liddard Tyler Denny reminds me very much about a match we've been just talking about: Pierce O'Leary versus Maxie Hughes. Tyler Denny really, I think, is kind of being fed to George Liddard, and I would expect George Liddard to win that. Struggling to pick a winner out of Adamez and Amo Williams. Really depends with Amo. I mean, we saw him against Hamza Shiraz, and he certainly had his moments in there. Arguably, gave Shiraz one of his tougher fights, and I think he's got the style that could really trouble Adamez, but you wonder if Adamez is one of those fighters that does lots of things well, rarely looks spectacular, and is just really, really tricky to beat. But I think it's certainly be worth looking at the odds for Adamez and Williams and seeing how much of an outsider Williams is there. But yeah, it's going to be another hectic weekend. Yeah,
I think you'd be surprised at the prices in that one, by the way. I think you'd be interested. He's nearly 3-1 against. He's 11-4, Amal Williams. So that does look big. I mean, I'd lean towards Adamez winning it. He doesn't fight very often, does he? He's had like one fight a year for the last 4 or so years, Matt. It's mad how little he's been in the ring. But when he is in the ring, he's pretty tough and he knows how to win. It's one of those, you'd probably be tempted by the bet, Amal Williams, but having the bet, suspecting that you're not going to quite get it over the line.
Exactly that.
Yeah. Got to say a big thank you to our sponsors, NES Medical, and also to the lovely Patreons as well. There is absolutely zero doubt that if we weren't supported by both the Patreons and NES Medical, we couldn't do the pod. Simple as that. Couldn't do it. I wouldn't do it. And even them, we're earning pocket money. So thank you so much to them. NES Medical, who specialize in complete medical coverage for boxing events, including Fight Night, ringside medical care, also ringside medicine training courses if you're interested, and also expert second opinions on all aspects of boxing related matters. So if you want to know about anything to do with that, then you can get in touch with them, nesmedical.co.uk or NAS Medical Limited on Instagram. And with the lovely patrons, John O'Brien got in touch. Thanks, John. I asked a question about where people were listening. John listens from Australia. He says, glad to finally be aboard. He means as a paid up patron. He says, I've been listening to you for the last few years, but this is the year I've decided to properly support independent boxing media. I don't listen to many, but I do listen to you guys. A particular favourite of mine was the interview with Victor Conte, the late Victor Conte. Yeah, that was a cracker, wasn't it, John? And he says, I've also been reading about Balco and various cycling tales. Tyler Hamilton's one is probably my favourite. John, I will put up, because it sounds like you and I are two peas in a pod. So I will put up on the Patreon, I will put up a reading list for you, because I've got loads of sort of sports, boxing, cycling, doping in sport related reading for you. So I will put that up on the Patreon app for you. So that's on my list of to do. So thanks for that. And thanks for the support. You can do so as well. Patreon.com or the Patreon app's less than $5 a month to keep the pod motoring forward and doing what we do. And next, we're going to talk about this week. This week, we take you back to the 11th of March, 1995. We're slightly out in the date, but we really wanted to do this. It's the MGM. It's the night that Herbie Hyde, the unbeaten Herbie Hyde, went in against the mighty Big Daddy Riddick Bowe himself. There's so much to talk about here, Matt, isn't there? But Herbie Hyde, unbeaten, defending his sort of fledgling WBO title for the first time.
Yeah, the WBO title, it wasn't. I mean, this is why there's some confusion when Lennox Lewis says he was, prior to Alexander Usyk, he was the last undisputed champion. And then people will maybe look at BoxRec and go, well, hang on, he never won the WBO title. The WBO title at this point was not widely regarded as a genuine, bona fide world championship. It just wasn't. Riddick Bowe had lost to Evander Holyfield in a bit of a surprise in their rematch. So he had lost his collection of belts. And he said prior to this fight with Herbie Hyde, who had won the WBO title from Michael Bent in a kind of supersonic performance, really, that once I've got the belt, the people will come to me anyway, or rather, they're going to be attracted to me. It doesn't matter what belt I've got; they're going to be attracted to me, and I'm going to win this fight. Herbie Hyde was saying that he was going to box rings round Riddick Bowe, and there were some people that were kind of wondering if he could, because he'd shown some really impressive skills going into this fight. He'd never done it against an opponent like Riddick Bowe. But Herbie Hyde, for a little while, I remember being really excited. I remember seeing him on things like Sports Night and things like that midweek, and thinking, cool. And it was hard not, even though it might sound stupid now, it was hard not to compare him to Muhammad Ali. He wasn't any Muhammad Ali, though, it turned out. But I tell you what, for the first two rounds and maybe 30 seconds of this fight, you're thinking he's gonna dominate this. Bowe can't get anywhere near him, and then it just went as wrong as a fight could possibly go for Herbie Hyde at that point.
Yeah, it went south, didn't it? It did go south. Yeah, he's boxing really well. Sort of off the back foot, jabbing, boxing, jabbing into the head and into the body. He was doing all the right things that a smaller man should do. And yeah, Riddick Bowe was looking slow, one paced, a bit sort of leaden footed, and maybe in a sense undermotivated or frustrated. And you did wonder watching the first couple of rounds whether he could keep it up. But there was just a sense with Herbie Hyde, mouth open pretty early on. You just got the, really trying to put everything into his shots. You just got the sense that he was in fifth gear pretty much from the very start. And the size difference is just frightening, Matt, isn't it? I mean, he came in, what was he? Nearly 2 stone. He was 214 pounds, 241 Riddick Bowe. So he was 27 pounds lighter. And also Riddick Bowe had this sort of 4-inch reach advantage as well, height advantage as well. So yeah, this just the difference in them physically is just stark, isn't it?
And becomes even more pronounced when Bowe starts landing on Herbie Hyde. The first knockdown, which wasn't called a knockdown, he kind of gets clipped, doesn't he, with a short shot that the referee doesn't see. He thinks that Hyde has slipped, and Hyde can't get up because he's away with the fairies. He can barely get his legs from under him, and it's really at that point. Well, so you think at that point, then Bowe is going to win via stoppage. But even when Hyde is kind of fighting through the fog, there's a few points where he seems to really hurt Riddick Bowe. And Riddick Bowe will say now, if you speak to Riddick Bowe now and say who hit you the hardest, he always says it was Herbie Hyde.
Interesting. There's some flashy moments from Hyde, no question about it. There's more sort of falling to the canvas or pushed down or scuffing shots, and he goes down one way or another. It's sort of quite untidy and scrappy, isn't it?
It is. When I said at the top what a fight that is, it's not a great fight. It's just a bit ridiculous. It will certainly capture your attention if you go back and watch it. You haven't seen it for a while. But yeah, it's you see flashes of what a fighter Herbie Hyde could have been. It's no surprise really if someone had then told you on this night this guy's going to finish his career at cruiserweight. You'd be like, yeah, that's probably a better idea, because even though you look at that 214 pounds and you think, is that genuine? Are you really 214 pounds, or have you got a couple of horseshoes in your pockets when you're standing on the scales there? Because he looks like he's about 200, and Bowe is at that stage of his career where he was a big guy. He was a big guy. And I think really when I watched this again today, knowing what happened to Riddick Bowe in terms of he would never regain the world heavyweight titles. He would never again look as good as he did on the night that he beat Evander Holyfield for the first time. I know he still had the third fight with Evander Holyfield to come, which was a good result for him, but also saw him on the canvas. Then there was not too far after that, you've got the hellacious affairs with Andrew Galota, and the kind of general consensus is that it was those fights with Galota that ruined Riddick Bowe. But you look at Riddick Bowe here, and he doesn't look anything like the fighter that beat Evander Holyfield only a few years before, and you think, well, is this Bowe on the way down? I think you could probably make a pretty strong argument that it was.
Yeah, I do think that. I think it's really clear. I mean, it's couched a little. You've got to have the context that he's got a lighter weight back foot mover in the other corner or opposing him. So it was maybe a night where it was difficult to look good for Bowe. I think that is fair to say. But you feel that the Bowe of a couple of years previous would have cut the ring down better, would have been quicker, would have been sharper. would have just been all round better and done a better job, I think, than he ultimately did on the night, because he doesn't really land any clean punches, really, Matt, doesn't he? They're few and far between. Everything is just a bit untidy. It's a cuffing shot. It's a leaning shot here and there. There's no real clean knockdowns as such.
No, and at this particular point in time, I remember kind of being fascinated by the heavyweight landscape at the time. You had Lennox Lewis, Evander Holyfield, obviously, Tyson kind of lurking in the background, and you're waiting for Riddick Bowe to show himself again. As each fight went along, whether it was against, I think it was Buster Mathis, Larry Donald, you're waiting for that Riddick Bowe, the one that we saw beat Evander Holyfield. We're waiting for that fighter to come back, because we all thought that he was one of the finest heavyweights we'd ever seen on that night. And I mean ever seen, going all the way back to 1890 or whatever. Riddick Bowe on that night was a supreme heavyweight. And we just didn't see him again. But we just thought because he was so young and he hadn't had what we would historically say was a grueling career, he'd had a couple of ding-dongs, but not really fights that you think they can't come back from. You always thought that, okay, so this will be the fight where we see Riddick Bowe again. This will be the fight. And it never really happened.
So how do we view the career? Because his is a career that's debatable. There are various sort of philosophies and thought processes about Riddick Bowe, isn't there? On the one hand, that highly promising, delivered early on, and then ate his way out of the latter stage of his career. You could say that maybe hard fights meant he wasn't able to replicate that early promise. Or if you're being harsh, you could say that some of that was flash in the pan and he just never was as good as perhaps his reputation was for some. Where do we join those strands together?
Yeah, it's difficult. I mean, I do hear now and again people will kind of put Riddick Bowe in their top 10 heavyweights of all time, and I'm sure they've got their logic for that. I'm not going to argue with those people. I think I've already made that clear over the years on this podcast that if you want to come and have an argument about heavyweight history to me, then I'm not going to even engage. I'll have a discussion about it, but I'm not going to argue. I think with Riddick Bowe, I don't think his career stacks up, to be perfectly honest with you, to be regarded as one of the greatest heavyweights of all time. But I do think with certain boxers, and I'll even throw James Buster Douglas into the mix here, is that on one night, you could make a case for them having a really strong argument with any heavyweight. So on the night that he beat Evander Holyfield, Riddick Bowe would have been difficult for any heavyweight in history to beat. Not saying he'd have beaten them all, but he'd have been difficult. Similarly, Buster Douglas, the night that he beat Mike Tyson. But as for his standing in history, if we want to go down that road, top 30 of all time in the heavyweights. But I wouldn't be putting him top 10 at all.
Some great lines, as ever, from HBO. There's two different versions you can watch on YouTube, by the way. There is a Sky Sports version, and there is also an HBO version. I watched the HBO just because I love, I've got a soft spot for the HBO coverage of the 90s in particular, but the early turn of the millennium as well. What about you, Matt?
HBO. I watch HBO one. Yeah. I generally do if it's there. Yeah.
Yeah, I did as well. A couple of great lines. Herbie Hyde, a star in AAA, now he's in the big leagues, said Larry Merchant at the very start, talking about where he'd been fighting, what it was now that he was doing, stepping up against Riddick Bowe. And then as the knockdowns stroke fall downs continued and littered this fight pretty much from start to finish, you can hear Jim Lampley saying, weird stuff happens when Riddick Bowe fights. And of course, you look at Bowe's history. I mean, it's true, isn't it? You got the two fights with Gallotta. You've got the parachute man coming
Yeah.
coming into the ring earlier on in his career against Hall. I mean, it's just stuff does happen, doesn't it, with Riddick Bowe?
It did, and there was a fight on the way up, Elijah Tillery or something like that, where there was some kind of incident within that fight, and then there was the Larry Donald fight where Bowe sucker punched Donald at the press conference, and it's just, yeah, I mean, it got even weirder in those Galota fights than it was at this point. But this hurt, honestly, like, watch it again, because Hyde is good for the first 2 rounds. Then he gets caught. Nobody bar Herbie Hyde seems to be aware of the fact that he's got caught. He could barely stand up. And it's almost like that it's for a film. You know, when people get boxing all wrong in films, they can't quite put it together to make it look like it really does. It's a bit like that from round 3 onwards, with the way that Hyde just keeps going down, and it doesn't appear that anybody's landing. I mean, and he is. I mean, I think he takes a really hefty uppercut at one point, and again, you don't see the punch land. But Hyde, for me, I think in the end, I think psychologically there was always question marks about Herbie Hyde. One of the strangest guys I've ever interviewed is Herbie Hyde. He phoned me up when there was that sting about him dealing drugs. And I spent an hour on the phone with him while he was trying to tell me how and why he'd been set up. And I spoke to him as well in the build-up to, I think he was in a prize fighter competition as well. I know he unnerved John Dennon on one particular occasion as well, much to my amusement. But he's a really bizarre character. And I think at the end of the fight, because the towel comes in, which is rejected by the referee, and he's almost like Heidi's like, oh my God, I thought it was over. And I think when he takes the count at the end, he is very conscious that he makes the decision that he is not getting back up.
Yeah, he sits it out. He kneels it out. Richard Steele, by the way, is that referee who ignores the towel coming in from the corner. And a couple of interesting points on this to finish off, Matt. HBO actually say the WBO is not recognised by HBO, so we don't consider this a world title fight.
Exactly. And I had some conversations with people at HBO when I was at Boxing News regarding when Boxing News took that stance. Looking back on it now, it's probably pretty silly to try and do it, but took that stance not to recognise sanctioning body titles. And I spoke to somebody who's involved at the HBO around this time, and they said, we tried to do it on television. We tried to call them out. There was a period of time where we didn't recognise any of the sanctioning body titles, and it didn't make one iota of difference. But yeah, you wouldn't get that now, would you? I mean, you've already highlighted what we get now with the P.S. O'Leary post-fight comment. But yeah, at the time, but it does highlight the WBO were not taken seriously for a long time. In this country, they were, because Frank Warren very, very quickly embraced that championship. But in America, no, it must have been turn of the century before it was widely recognised as a major belt in America.
And interestingly, on this bill, it was a heavyweight bill, really. Corey Sanders, who was 2-0, South African. Corey Sanders, who would beat Vladimir, lose to Vitali. And Brian Nielsen, the big Dane, was 16-0, both of them winning by stoppage, by the way. Brian Nielsen, who was 16-0 at this time. Of course, he would later fight both Holyfield and Tyson, wouldn't he? They were both on the bill.
Brian Nielsen, crikey, he was a strange old story as well, wasn't he? Didn't he get to like about 50-0 or something before he fought a rather tired and close to the end Mike Tyson? Tyson just about got him out of there, and then he lost to a tired and nearly finished Evander Holyfield as well a little bit later on, didn't he?
And finally, on the back of this one, they interview Rock Newman at the end, Bowe's manager, don't they? They interview him at the end, and they say, this is the time when Mike Tyson is just about to come back out of prison. This is just a few months away. This is March of 95. Tyson will fight McNeely in the summer, the August of 95, and everyone's queuing up for the Tyson fight already. And Rock Newman says, we're going to go, he pretty much says, we're going to get in the car, go straight to Indiana, and we're going to have a chat. Respectfully, we're going to have a chat with Mike Tyson.
That would have been a tremendous fight if it was the Riddick Bowe of that particular night against Evander Holyfield. I wonder what would have happened if they'd have fought in, say, 1996. This version of Riddick Bowe with the Mike Tyson in 1996. I wonder. And it's interesting, isn't it? When you hear these comments from people in a short period of time, it shows you how precious and short your time is. Because Riddick Bowe, at this point in time, would have thought he had all the time in the world and that the opportunities would keep coming. And his career was over. To all intents and purposes, his career was over within a few years.
Indeed. He would fight Jorge Luis Gonzalez, who'd beat him in the amateurs. He'd fight him. He'd beat Holyfield again later this year, stopping Evander Holyfield in their trilogy. But really, we had seen the best of Bowe, and it wasn't necessarily the best of Bowe that beat Herbie Hyde on this night. That's from This Week in History and all the related stories from 1995. Thanks to you for your continued support. We'll speak to you again next time. Bye for now.